AMD launched a new graphics card today, and they told me about it in the second half of an email, where the first half of the email was, well, we got a new driver update to support the open beta early access for Gears of War E-Day. So apparently less important than that is the fact they're launching a new graphics card, this one targeting the more budget audience. So hey, exciting, right? New GPU at a lower price point, except wait a minute. This is apparently coming out at $279 suggested price, but it wasn't that long ago we could get a 9060 XT 8GB version for that price. Now, in the current market, they're higher than that. But okay, hopefully this is at least close to that level of performance and specs, right? Wait a minute, 16 compute units? Doesn't the 9060 XT have 32 compute units? And the answer is yeah. Also, while they claim this has 8GB of VRAM, some versions do, but we have seen that there actually are versions with only 4GB of VRAM. Also, I'm seeing some articles claiming that the price is $249, but again, I'm showing you the screenshot of the email that I got directly from AMD saying that it's a $279 price point. Now, maybe that refers to the 8GB version, and maybe the 4GB version is $249, and AMD is just not telling me about the 4GB version. So I don't know, maybe. But there definitely are 4GB versions, so be very careful if you are going to be looking into buying one of these, that you get the 8GB version, not the 4GB version, because it absolutely exists. Now, so what can we actually expect from performance here? And also, where are they even launching this? Because this is not a complete global launch. They're saying this is in the APJ and Latin American markets. I'm pretty sure APJ would be like Asian, Pacific, Japan, and then we also have Latin American markets. But oftentimes when we get a card launched in some regions, we end up getting it in other regions as well. So videocards.com has this helpful chart. All my sources will be in the video description, where you can see how the RX 9050 stacks up against the 9060 and 9060 XT 8GB version. If you're like, wait, there's a 9060 non-XT version? Yes, but it's really a system integrator card for pre-built systems as opposed to being something available on the DIY market. So as the DIY market goes, compared to the 9060 XT 8GB version, which again launched at $299 and was readily available below its MSRP for its first several months, although is currently at higher prices. I know VRAM prices did go up. We have exactly half of the compute units at 16 instead of 32, which means we have half the stream processors, half the ray accelerators, half the AI accelerators, and it doesn't even reach the same game clocks or boost clocks. Game clocks hitting 1,920 megahertz as opposed to 2,530 megahertz. Boost clocks up to 2,600 megahertz as opposed to 3,130 megahertz. So, you know, texture units are cut in half. It does have the same number of ROPs. So at least there's that. Anyway, so the memory capacity is 8GB on certain models, but we have seen that there are definitely 4GB versions that AMD didn't want to mention to me, but we're seeing them listed for sure. And then even the memory speed has been cut down, where the 9060 XT 8GB version comes with 20 gigabits per second memory. The GDDR6 in this card comes in at 18 gigabits per second. It has the same 128-bit bus, but with the reduced memory speeds, we're hitting 288 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth as opposed to 320 gigabytes per second on the 9060 XT 8GB version. So it also has a lower total board power at 92 watts versus 150 watts on the 9060 XT 8GB version. And unfortunately, though, that means it still needs an 8-pin power connector, because I was going to say the one potential saving grace for this, if it's this cut down, is if it could get by just on the PCIe power and not require an external power connector, then it could be interesting as far as upgrading an office PC with a power supply that doesn't even have 8-pin power connectors or something like that. So apparently it still does need the 8-pin power connector, so we don't even have that going for it. So this, I would say, is pretty disappointing specs if it's targeting a price point where you used to get literally double the compute units for the exact same price that this is apparently launching at. So what can we expect performance-wise? Well, AMD certainly did not ship me a review sample, and I haven't seen any reviews up for it yet, so I don't know if anybody did. Maybe in these regions, we'll have to see. They did claim some first-party performance claims, but not relative to anything else, so it doesn't really mean anything. Because it's like, okay, you can get 60 FPS in 007 First Light at 1080p medium settings. In what scene of the game? When other GPUs are getting what? It doesn't tell us that. So they just give us some performance numbers, but with literally no information other than 1080p medium that could be staring at a wall, or it could be the most demanding scene in the game, and we don't really see how that stacks up against anything else. Not really that informative. Now, we could try to look at something like the Tech PowerUp relative performance chart and then just sort of guess based on the specs, where the 9060 XT 8GB, if I set that as the baseline 100%, I mean, we know that we have half the compute units, but almost the full memory bandwidth, and then not half of the boost clocks or anything like that, although reduced boost clocks. So I would expect, worst case scenario would be half the performance, but it might actually be better than that, right? So I would expect it to reach more than half of the performance of the 9060 XT 8GB, at least if we're talking about the 8GB version, not the 4GB version, which I imagine in many games will just absolutely be destroyed because tons of games nowadays, even on their lowest settings, do want more than 4GB of VRAM. But if we're talking 8GB version versus 8GB version, I mean, if we go down to 50% of the performance of the 9060 XT 8GB, that would be putting us in the ballpark of cards like a GTX 1070 or 1070 Ti, a 5600 XT, GTX 1080, RTX 2060. Now, if we give it a little bit of, benefit of the doubt and say it'll reach more than half of the performance of the 9060 XT 8GB, now we'd be closing in cards like the RX 6600 from AMD, which launched about 5 or 6 years ago with 8GB of VRAM and was readily available for years at about $200, $200 to $220 was its typical new price for years and years and years. Although certainly wasn't its MSRP, but it's been available at that price for a long time. Now, those models are sold out now, so not currently, but apparently, it could be close to something like a 2070 6600 XT. RTX 3060 12GB version is likely more powerful than that, but if it kind of overperforms its expected spec, like maybe it'll be in line with something like a 3060. 3060s can be found on the used market for less than this, and on the new market, not that much more. Cards like an RX 7600 are likely more performant than this. So this seems like a really bad deal at the published price. But again, I can't tell you for sure without actually getting my hands on one. And like I said, I was certainly not given a review sample or any real information other than what I just shared with you here. So there's really just speculation on that. Now, looking at the current market, you could still buy brand new an RX 7600 from AMD, which is an 8GB card that is likely more performant than this, for $260 new. Now, I think these are just kind of like new old stock, so I'm not sure they're really shipping more of them, but that's certainly worth noting. What's an RTX 5050 cost these days? So 5050, I could get one for $290, which is also an 8GB card, so that's slightly more, but I would expect the 5050 to probably be more performant than this, considering the 5050 reaches about 76% of the performance of an RX 9060 XT 8GB, and yet this 9050 is going to have half the compute units of the 9060 XT 8GB. So I would imagine the 5050 is probably more powerful and has your Nvidia name brand and feature set for, at least in the US, what would be a lower price, although this isn't launching in the US, so I mean, maybe there's that. So yeah, this seems kind of rough. Again, there are 4 GB versions as well, which, I mean, if you're doing anything other than an esports build, oh man, like even then, I just can't imagine spending $250 to $300 on a 4 GB graphics card halfway through the year 2026. It certainly feels like we're moving backwards here. Like if it came out as a 4 GB card that was powered just off the PCIe slot for like $100 to $150, that might be kind of interesting. But like, oh, this is close to $300. That's crazy. Now, on the Nvidia side of things, we are seeing more articles about Nvidia hiking graphics card prices for the third time this year and by up to 30% as distributors enter panic mode, with MSI and Colorful announcing RTX 50 price increases for distributors. RTX 5070 Ti now starts 38% over MSRP. We see some MSI RTX 50 pricing here with the updates where you can see model by model, the previous pricing and the updated pricing. You can see increases across the board on this. So yeah, we're seeing Colorful also listing increased prices on models here as well. So just overall, if you convert to US pricing, you can see the models jumping pretty considerably. Now, this is Chinese pricing, but we could probably expect to be seeing that those prices hit US and European markets soon as well. Now, since I'm already doing a news video today, I did see a few other things, some of which could be construed as positive news for PC gaming. So maybe let's get to something like that. So Xbox owners of 13 Ubisoft games receive PC versions at no extra cost. So this seems to be some deal between Xbox and Ubisoft, where if you buy an Xbox version of a game, you should also get the PC version of the game at no additional cost. So that's pretty cool. It looks like the games currently being included here: Assassin's Creed Mirage, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Avatar: Frontiers of Pandora, Far Cry 6, Immortals: Phoenix Rising, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Riders Republic, Skull and Bones, The Crew 2, Crew Motorfest, Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Extraction, Rainbow Six Siege, and Watch Dogs Legion. Now, this only works if you buy Xbox, then you get the PC version. If you already own the PC version, you will not receive a free Xbox version. I would say that this seems to be even more signs that the next Xbox is likely to be a PC, and so the next Xbox games with Project Helix, you're likely just going to be getting a PC version of the game that's maybe optimized out of the box to run well on that specific pre-built PC. But again, we'll have to see if Xbox does kind of shift their strategy at all. There's only so much you can do on these kinds of things because it takes years to get a console ready. But there was a change in leadership, so it's interesting to speculate at least on how much of these Xbox plans are going to continue as we were pretty sure we knew what they were with the change in leadership. So it certainly seems like a lot of things have been set in motion for getting the next Xbox generation ready to just be a pre-built PC that runs a controller-friendly version of Windows out of the box, and this certainly seems to tie into that. Now, with the next generation of consoles, there's been all sorts of discussion over the digital-only future. Now, I know on PC we've been used to this for a long time, but remember on PC, even though Steam is kind of the de facto store, there is competition. There are other storefronts that do compete, and certain popular games aren't even available on Steam. And then there's key selling sites. There's even piracy as well. So in other words, there's competing ways to access games on PC, so it doesn't become a complete monopoly and everything tied to one single store and service. In the console landscape, if you lose the physical media aspect of it, there starts to be questions on how much does it just go down a complete monopoly system where you only have the one storefront to buy from. And then there's also issues of, and if there's only the one service that you're relying on to play and access all of these titles, what happens when that service goes down? Or 20 years from now, what if Microsoft doesn't care about Xbox anymore? Do you even have access to playing your games in the future? And so just in this last few days, we've seen PlayStation outage, stopping people from playing their digital games. Xbox went down as well for considerable amounts of time. So this is kind of highlighting that concern. So there's the value concerns, there's ownership concerns, there's monopoly concerns. And then there's also just this issue of, relying on one online service for access to all of your games for the, for the infinite future of accessing them. And if those go down or are shut down or anything. And then videocards.com today also had an article reminding us that it has now been 18 months since the announcement that Nvidia's Reflex 2 would be on the way. And we have still not actually gotten access to that. So I do occasionally get comments on my channel asking about whatever happened to Reflex 2. Good question. Anyway, all right, so all sources will be in the video description today. Hope you guys found it useful and or interesting. I don't know if at some point I'll be able to get access to a 9050. Maybe, again, I'm in a region where it didn't launch, so it might be difficult. Hopefully somebody, usually somebody like Hardware Unboxed or something like that'll source some, version of it to benchmark or something like that. So hopefully we get something like that soon. And I hope all of you have an excellent day.